Hi, welcome to Album Soup, where we talk about the ingredients, influences, and genres that shape a particular album. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Sublime. As someone who grew up in Southern California, Sublime sound has always very much appealed to me because it reminds me of the beach and other elements of my childhood. And as I've gotten older and a lot more interested in music, I have honestly become very impressed by their blend of reggae and punk and ska and lots of other things, as I'll get into in this video. Now, in doing the research for this video, I learned that they covered and sampled and borrowed from far more than I originally thought that they did. And while an uncharitable interpretation might call that stealing, I prefer to think of it as heavy influencing. And Sublime wasn't necessarily shy about their influences. They could have perhaps been a bit more forthcoming, but they still managed to craft a very unique signature sound by blending all of those influences together. And so, without further ado, I'm going to dissect some of the genres that they took inspiration from and some of the albums that you should check out if you really like them. I'm going to start with reggae. Reggae is a genre that I think anyone who's listened to Sublime can hear pretty much right away. The band really loved reggae, and they were really at the right place at the right time for a mainstream kind of renaissance of reggae music in the United States. This was when the genre was being popularized by lots of different artists in America, kind of bringing it in with other sounds. I'll talk about that later in the video. And Sublime, nonetheless, borrowed a lot from classic reggae, from artists from Jamaica, from earlier decades. And I'm going to talk about that actually in two parts. But first, reggae. My first album recommendation is Bob Marley and the Wailers with Burning. I could have picked basically any Bob Marley album for this list. That being said, I picked Burning because it's one of their early ones, which I think is kind of considered like, I don't know, more important in the roots reggae canon, although I will admit I don't know that much about that scene. This also has I Shot the Sheriff, which I think is kind of a thematically similar thing for Sublime, especially given that they have that song about rioting after LA, after the Rodney King stuff on this album. And of course, Bob Marley is the face of reggae for a very good reason. Definitely the most famous artist from this genre, one that everyone who knows reggae and is interested in reggae should start with. Next up, The Wailing Souls with Stranded. This album really links reggae in Jamaica to its proliferation in the United States. The stranded in question in the album's title is actually being stranded in LA, which is fitting given that Sublime were from the LA region in Long Beach, which, if you don't know, is a town just south of LA. The song Wa Dare Around a John Shop, man, I'm struggling a lot with the pronunciation of the Jamaican stuff here, is covered on Sublime's album as Pawn Shop. And honestly, this is my favorite reggae album that I'm talking about today. I think it's just a really great album, and I'm really glad I discovered it, and you should too. Next up, I'm going to talk about Half Pint with Greetings. I don't love this album quite as much, but I will acknowledge that it has a very upbeat, happy, bouncy sound, and the song Loving off of this album was reworked by Sublime into What I Got. The melody is basically the same, the lyrics are different, the vibe is a little different for sure, but the melody is there. And so this album is very cool, very happy, very sunny, very like easy, I suppose. It's a lot less political and kind of aggressive than some of this other stuff. Not quite as much my thing, but maybe you'll like it. And my last reggae album recommendation is Toots and the Maytals with In the Dark. These guys, as far as I know, are kind of number 2 in reggae, or at least very high up there in terms of the importance after Bob Marley. The song 5446 is about being jailed for marijuana. I believe that Sublime covered this on 40 Ounce to Freedom, although maybe it's Robin the Hood, I'm not totally sure. Regardless, this album is really cool. They have an awesome reggae cover of Take Me Home Country Roads, the John Denver song, so do check that out for sure. I definitely like this one, and I definitely recommend it. Okay, next I'm going to talk about dancehall, which as far as I can tell is a subgenre or a split off from reggae. They are very similar genres. I would argue that they have a lot of overlap, and I cannot always hear a distinction between the two, but they do have some key differences. First of all, dancehall uses a lot more electronic production, whereas reggae, classic reggae like Bob Marley reggae, is more acoustic. Second of all, while Bob Marley's music and those other reggae artists who I talked about often are more political and social in their lyrics and themes, dancehall is usually more about dancing. It's about fun, it's about partying, it's about love and that type of thing. So I prefer roots reggae to dancehall without a doubt, but I see the value in both, and Sublime definitely took some influences from dancehall, especially more specific sonic elements like bass lines and stuff, as you'll see in a sec. My first album recommendation is Courtney Melody with Ninja Me Ninja Showcase. Apparently, the bass line to Garden Grove comes from this, although I actually didn't hear it. That being said, it was still really fun to listen to. This compilation is cool because it has the vocal track and then the dub track back to back, and that's kind of a fun way to sequence a compilation, if you ask me. It's just solid, straight ahead dancehall songs. Next up, Tenor Saw with Fever, another artist that Sublime took quite a bit. The song Jailhouse off of the Sublime album partly covers a super early Bob Marley song, but also partly covers a song from this one, the song Roll Call. I also think that this album is a bit more experimental and adventurous with songwriting, and the electronic production is a lot more prominent here. Next up, I have Frankie Paul with Reggae Max. The title of this album kind of a testament to the overlapping nature of dancehall and reggae. This is much more of a love album. It's got a lot of ballads. It's very sweet. It's where Get Ready, the Sublime song, comes from. And then my last dancehall album recommendation is Wayne Smith with Under Me Slang Tang. This is definitely the bounciest album on this list. It's got much fatter, kind of thicker production. I think it's much more of like a bassy album too, and it's where the bass line for Caress Me Down comes from, so not a surprise there. If you like kind of the groovier bass lines that Eric Wilson lays down in a lot of Sublime songs, dancehall might be for you, and come to some of these albums if you want to hear more of that. So I have more to say about Jamaican music, but I'm going to circle back there because I think it kind of is a good tangent point, or a good connecting point to what I'm talking about next, which is punk music, specifically Southern California punk. So Southern California is certainly not where punk comes from, but it's a very important place in the history of hardcore punk. You know, stuff from London, stuff from New York was a lot softer, even if it wasn't soft by comparison. And SoCal was really an epicenter of hardcore punk in the late 70s, especially in the 80s and in the 90s. Sublime, as children of that era who grew up on this music, really took a lot of influences from punk music. They were very forthcoming with the bands that they really liked. I limited it down to 4. There were a lot of others I could have picked. I hope these are ones that you might find interesting. First up, Big Drill Car with Batch. I've seen somewhere that this was like their biggest influence. I'm not sure if I can verify that. At the same time, the influence is clearly there. These guys are cited as a big early creator of melodic hardcore, which upon listening to it, I honestly think is just pop punk. If you like Green Day, this might be up your alley. I grew up on Green Day personally, and I love it. I definitely like that more than Big Drill Car, but this was still fun. Next up, Bad Religion with How Could Hell Be Any Worse. Now, these guys are famous also for being more like Green Day and being more like pop punk. That was later in their career, however. At this point in their career, this is their debut. They were a lot more hardcore, a lot more harsher and edgier and all that stuff. And this album, like, was way better and way more interesting than I thought it would be. I ended up loving it. I think it's a classic of hardcore. Sublime has covered them. Definitely worth checking out. Next up, a less famous band by quite a lot called Secret Hate with the album Vegetables Dancing. I think it's their only album. These guys had a very short career. They didn't put out very much stuff. They did reunite later, but like as a lot of cool punk bands do, they formed, they made some quick, angry stuff, and then they disbanded. Plus, they wrote the song The Ballad of Johnny Butt, which Sublime cover. Last up, Minutemen, Double Nickels on the Dime, a super important punk rock album that I've talked about before on this channel. These guys are also from the Long Beach area, like Sublime. They're sampled. They are actually sampled on the very first moment of the very first song on Sublime's very first album, on Waiting for My Ruka, a song that I generally don't like that much, but I do think the Minutemen sample is really cool. This album is like a collection of punk sketches. It's like 43 songs, well over an hour. Very short songs, but if you're looking for like really well-developed, comprehensive songwriting, this is not your place to go. If you're looking for a lot of cool, raw ideas, you'll definitely like it. Okay, now I'm going to bridge the Jamaican music that I talked about first with the punk music, with ska punk, aka third wave ska. So ska actually did come from Jamaica way back in like the 50s. Reggae evolved from ska, as a matter of fact, if I'm not wrong. There was a second wave of ska, especially in the 70s in the UK, with bands like the Specials. And then third wave ska was big in the late 80s and early 90s, especially in LA, with bands like No Doubt and Fishbone, and Sublime being one of the biggest ones. And so this genre brings together a lot of elements of ska, especially the horns and some Jamaican rhythms, with punk music. And while I will fully be transparent and say it's not my favorite, I'm very glad I've checked it out. My first album recommendation is in fact The Specials, not third wave, but second wave. These guys kind of incorporated the punk of their era, which was more like, I don't know, like the Clash type of punk than it was like Minutemen or like Bad Religion type of punk. but they're super important in the ska revival movement. Something that I think might grow on me as I listen to it more. Next up, Fishbone with Truth and Soul. These guys were, I believe, from Southern California, but were before Sublime. Eric Wilson, Sublime's bassist, said that a show of Fishbone was his first introduction to ska, and it like blew his mind. This album kind of has some more punk songs and some more ska songs, but I really appreciate how much horn work there is. I think that's one of the coolest parts about ska, at least for me as someone who played horns for most of my life. Next up, Operation Ivy with Energy. This is definitely more of a punk album than a ska album. It's pretty harsh a lot of the time, although there are some pop punk-esque tracks on here, but there still are some ska rhythms and reggae rhythms and guitar work and stuff that make it fit into this kind of general category. Last up, 311 with their self-titled. These guys also evolved quite a lot, but earlier in their career they were another big third wave ska band. This album has a lot more of like the rap metal type of stuff than Sublime does. Definitely not something I enjoy as much, but worth checking out given that they were very much like contemporaries and compared a lot in their eras. Okay, next up I'm going to talk about Golden Age hip hop. This might seem like a subtler influence on Sublime, but it's actually a very important one. Not only did Sublime use tons and tons of sampling, but they name dropped rappers and they clearly got a lot of ideas and kind of ethos from them. So I definitely think that if you want to really fully appreciate Sublime's sound and artistic ethos, you definitely need to look at the hip hop that they listen to. I love hip hop. It's one of my favorite genres, if not my favorite genre. I don't really know much hip hop from before the early 90s. This was an interesting experience to listen to some earlier stuff. Still not stuff I love, but definitely stuff that I'm interested in and that's growing on me. My first album recommendation is the Beastie Boys with Paul's Boutique, a super famous, super important album in the 80s. I think the sampling on here is really cool and I really appreciate that. It's got a lot of energy, it's got a lot of punky kind of personality. Bradley of Sublime absolutely loved it. It's not hard to see why. Next up, Boogie Down Production with Ghetto Music, the Blueprint of Hip Hop. Long name, pretty cool album. This is by KRS-One under the name Boogie Down Production, which was his group, but essentially at this point was a solo project. He really influenced Sublime a lot in terms of like political and social consciousness. They have a song named after him on one of the earlier albums. I definitely don't agree with all of the fiery takes on this album, but I respect KRS-One quite a bit for both his rap talent and for being willing to say it all. Next up, Too Short with Life is Too Short, a prominent early West Coast rapper, although from the Bay Area, like San Francisco, not from Oakland, actually, not San Francisco, not an LA guy. This album is pretty forward-looking, at least in my opinion, compared to these other ones I'm talking about. The production is a lot more minimal, and I think that works to its favor because it makes you listen to the rapping a lot more than like really hard drum beats or whatever. Plus, I mean, who else was making 8-minute rap songs in the 80s? I think that's just really innovative and really interesting. Last up, I have Just Ice with The Desolate One. Apparently, one time Bradley took this album to a local radio station and just said, drop the needle anywhere, it's going to be gold. It's got a little bit of a, the 80s rhyme scheme that I kind of think are corny, that modern listeners probably aren't super fond of, but I think the kind of blueprint of gangsta rap is there, and you can hear it. Next up, surf rock. Now this is definitely more subtle than a lot of the other things I've talked about, but I do think that surf rock is worth talking about when talking about Sublime's influences. First of all, it just really baked into the Southern California music scene and the sound and the culture. Second of all, I think that surf rock is probably underappreciated for its innovation in things like guitar distortion. And I mean, it also pioneered the Beach Boys, and they influenced like a whole generation of psychedelic pop and stuff. So surf rock definitely deserves its day and in the sun. And I'm gonna shout out some records that I think Sublime were fans of, or probably were fans of. First up, the Bel Airs with their self-titled. This was one of the biggest surf rock bands back in the day. I think that their sound, especially the guitar sound and the instrumental sound, keep in mind surf rock originally was an instrumental genre, not a vocal genre. This is really good encapsulation of what that's all about. Sublime also borrows a lot from the song Mr. Moto here on their song Seed. Next up, The Champs with Go Champs Go. This is the album that has the song Tequila on it, which you've definitely heard, even if you don't know you've heard it. This is shorter and sweeter and simpler, but they have a lot of horn stuff going on too, so that definitely makes it a bit more dynamic and interesting and unique, and it's fun to listen to. Next up, the Ziggins with Rusty Never Sleeps. Now I'm actually jumping to Sublime's contemporaries, no longer looking back at the early 60s. The Ziggins were actually Sublime's sister band. They do not sound that similar to Sublime. A little bit, they have some of the reggae and punk stuff, but they're a lot more surf rock oriented, even slightly indie rock. And I also think the themes and lyrics on this album are more relevant to like youth life and stuff. I mean, I know Sublime talk about partying, but this is like more about like, I don't know, young love and that type of thing, which Sublime isn't really about. And last up, the Falling Idols, another band that Sublime were friends with back in the day. They didn't last very long. I think they were even just, might have just been like a high school project, but they were covered on Robin the Hood, another Sublime cover. And I think that they blend surf rock and punk in a pretty cool way. Okay, now I'm talking about my final genre for today's video. This is reggae fusion. By reggae fusion, I'm speaking pretty broadly here. It's pop music, or not necessarily pop, but mainstream music in the United States that infuses a lot of elements of reggae in it, even if it's not specifically reggae music. Sublime is a great example of reggae fusion, and so are these other albums that I'm going to talk about, things that Sublime were really into. First up, the Toys with their self-titled. I don't think these guys were that famous in their heyday, but honestly, I think they deserve a lot more credit. First of all, they wrote the song Smoke Two Joints, which Sublime later covered. And while I've talked about a lot of Sublime covers in this video, this is the only cover I think that I definitely prefer the original to, and I think Sublime's cover is actually a lot worse. Usually I think they're roughly the same, or Sublime's is better. In this case, the Toys' Smoke Two Joints is way more fun to listen to. This album is really reggae. It's a lot more reggae than anything else I'm talking about here, even more reggae than Sublime is, but there's still a lot of really silly humor, like almost like Zappa-esque humor. So I really liked this album. It blew me away. Didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did, and I definitely recommend it. Next up, the Fugees with Blunted on Reality. This is the group that launched Lauryn Hill. They have a very short but a very good discography. They are very much a rap group, so they're not reggae, but they have reggae influences. Two of the three members were from or have Haitian roots, and I definitely think you can hear the Caribbean influence, especially on the vocals, on some of the flows and some of the word choices and things that they made, plus Sublime sample Nappy Heads on What I Got. So I definitely think you should give this a listen. Next up, Linton Kwesi Johnson and Poets and the Roots. This album is Dread, Beat, and Blood. Now, this is very much a dub album. I didn't talk about dub much earlier, but it's basically, I don't want to oversimplify, but I think it's reggae with electronic production, even more than dancehall is. This album is very much a conduit for Johnson's poetry, which has some political stuff. It's not necessarily easy to understand given all the patois, I think, mixed in, but it's a cool one. It's sampled on Garden Grove as well, like the back half that's very sampley. This is where that comes from. Worth a listen. And last up, I'm going to talk about Bad Brains with their self-titled album. Bad Brains are one of the most acclaimed hardcore punk bands ever, so I think they're actually probably one of the most famous bands, or this is one of the most famous albums I'm mentioning in this video. Interestingly, they did not actually blend reggae into their punk. They were Rastafarian, and they do have reggae stuff, but it's like they didn't blend them. They just had punk songs and then reggae songs side by side on the same album. And I thought that makes for a very interesting listen, and that's why I think this album is really cool, worth your time. Check it out. That does it for my commentary about the influences of Sublime. I'll admit that upon researching their influences, I realized they covered and borrowed heavily from a lot more than I realized that they did. I still think that they created a very unique sound, and that's why I give them credit as innovators, but this is the most important album I've covered thus far in this channel with the respect of recognizing influences. Sometimes artists have created a very unique sound, and I'm just interested to see where they got it from, because of course they're influenced by things. This is an album that, while I love it, I definitely think knowing the source material is important. You as a Sublime fan, me as a Sublime fan, we all have the obligation to respect the reggae, respect the black artists that pioneered the stuff that they later borrowed from and kind of put a spin on. So this album is something that I return to again and again. The softer cuts here, especially Santeria, is something that I might come back to when I want to feel at peace, when I want to feel like I'm chilling on the beach and really feel at right with the world. It's an album that makes me feel at home no matter where I am. I hope that it also moves you emotionally, and that I would love to hear your thoughts on this album in the comments, so let me know. Thank you so much for watching Album Soup. I am going to continue covering lots of different albums. The next album I'm covering is a very, very different type of album than this one, so keep on the lookout for that. Thanks. Have a good one.